Hi there, my name's Karen Campbell. Welcome to my channel. Today we are discussing all things alcohol markers. Why? Because I teach them in my paid courses at Awesome Art School, and I also mention them a ton in my drawing books that I sell. So I want to talk about what is an alcohol marker, what are the prices, what are the brands, what paper do you use, what are your nib choices, and which one should I buy, and what's the best way to color with them. We're talking all things today. So let's start with your actual markers. There's a lot of alcohol markers on the market that are available for purchase, and they range from anywhere from 50 cents a marker to $10 a marker. And you're thinking like, well, there must be like a huge difference between the quality of those products. I just want to say that all alcohol markers can be used interchangeably. So whether you're using your 50-cent marker or your $10 marker, you can use them the same way in the same project to give you some assurances that like it's all good, they all play nicely together. And the commonality between them is the alcohol is the solvent in which the pigment, the color lives in your marker. So whether you're using a Sharpie or a $10 Copic, they can still play together. So that's the huge upside, okay? The side effect of that is, at least for me personally, I went through a very long period where I just collected any and all alcohol markers I could get my hands on. So if I could get some cheap ones, I just bought the cheap ones because I was just happy to be able to play the alcohol marker game, if you will. So my favorite recommendation, so the biggest bang for your buck are the Arteza ones, because you can buy a whole giant pack and I think it only ends up being less than $1 per marker. They also have a skin tone pack that's 36 skin tones in one pack. It's super affordable. Again, very, very cheap. So if you're new to alcohol marker coloring, I would suggest you start with a cheap set, because there is a little bit of like an art when it comes to coloring with these things. So if you're afraid to start, but you do want to have a nice set to just, you know, be able to have all your color selections, I would recommend not spending a ton of money, because then you have on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have Copic sketches, which can run up to $10 per marker. So what's the difference? Okay, so first of all, like I said, they all work exactly the same way. So the first difference you'll notice is their nib differences. So there's essentially three types of nibs available on alcohol markers. You have a chisel, which is this, where's my camera? Which is this big honker doodle right there. And it's nice because you can get different shape lines. You can get thick lines, right? You can have thin lines. And so you do have a lot of ease of maneuverability. And then this other little one is, this is called the bullet nib, because it's a little tiny bullet at the end of your marker. Okay, so all of your low cost, low end alcohol markers are going to have those two nibs for the most part. My favorite nib, and one I look for now, is the brush nib, and it works just like a little paintbrush. Okay, so it's very soft and you can maneuver it just like you would a paintbrush. So depending on your marker that you buy, it'll come with two nibs. A lot of marker companies actually give you replaceable nibs either with your set, or you can buy additional nibs. So if a nib wears out, you can replace it, which is great, and it makes them a little bit more cost effective as well, especially if you're buying the higher end Copic sketches. All right, so that just to let you know, there's a lot of brands, like I said. So if you want to understand if the market that you're looking on Amazon or your art store, you need to read the ingredients, and if it says alcohol based, then you know that it'll work with the other ones that you have already. Another thing about the Copic sketches, even though they're the most expensive, and just so you're aware, Copic has two lines. They have a Copic Chow and they have a Copic Sketch. The Copic Chows are rounded barrel, and they have the brush nib and the chisel nib. However, their colors come in 180 colors, whereas the sketch comes in 300, and I forget the final number, 358 are the colors of the sketch markers. So these are a little bit cheaper than the Copic sketches, but the ink inside them is the same. Another thing that makes the Copic sketches a little bit more affordable in the long run, even though their upfront cost is very, very high, is that all of their colors are, you can buy refills for, and a refill will fill a marker, I think it's almost up to 3 times. And these are inexpensive. So you're really paying your upfront cost for the barrel, which you'll live forever, and then you can refill as you go. And just to show you exactly how to refill, let me show you how to do that while we're here. So to refill a Copic marker, okay, this is the nib. You can pull the nib out Here's your refill. It's very straightforward. This opens up and then you can literally just drop the ink in here. Copics are also nice because they have very low odor. All alcohol markers are permanent, although I have to say that not all alcohol markers are light fast. Okay, so just because it's permanent doesn't mean that it's not going to fade. Even though it's permanent, the ink may stay there, but your black ink may look yellow after a year or so. So that really depends. So these are not going to last fade free in 100 years. So it's very simple to refill your Copic. Okay, now before you even start coloring, we're gonna get into all of this, is you need to make sure you have the right paper. Now, all of these companies make marker paper, and I hate marker paper. I don't recommend it. They're supposed to be bleed proof. They're very pricey. And the first thing I noticed is that, oh, look at that. They're not bleed proof, actually. They're also semi-transparent, which drives me crazy because you end up with such flimsy drawings. So personally, I do not recommend, see how transparent that is? I do not recommend marker paper because of the price and because of the transparency, and that because even though they say they're bleed proof, I really do not think that they are. So the reason that they do work well is that because they're so flimsy, they don't absorb the marker, so they make your markers last quite a long time. For instance, if you were to use these on, say, either regular printer paper or like watercolor paper, it just leaches the ink right through because it's so porous. So these are specifically formulated so that the ink, it's not leaching the ink into it and you don't have a lot of bleed. So a workaround for that is to use something like Bristol because it's equally smooth, so it's not leaching the ink. However, I have a few years ago, discovered a fantastic paper that's a fraction of the price. Because cardstock is great, but cardstock is still very absorbent. But I have this premium color, it's actually cover stock, and you can buy a whole ream of it for between $10 and $20. And it is the most amazing marker paper ever because there's zero bleed. You have really nice and sturdy sheets. That's what this is. So you can't see through. I mean, there's zero bleed, like not through at all. And then this lasts much more my portfolios. I can keep these, you know, they're strong and they're gonna last long, so all my drawings can be done on them, and they're not flimsy. So I just like the longevity of them and the cost. So the cost for marker paper comes out to be probably around 30 cents a sheet. The cost of this Hammermill Cover Stock is 4 cents. So yes, when you're writing books like me and you go through paper like crazy, that 4 cents makes a huge difference. Okay, so now let's get to like the coloring techniques. The first thing I have to say is always color swatch your colors because it's really nice to see what they look like. They don't always match the cap, although I do say the Copics do a really good job of getting pretty darn close. Some other manufacturers, like the concept ones that they sell at Jerry's Artorama, they sell these in my Fun Fab drawing kits over there. The color caps are not accurate at all, so I always recommend color swatching. You can do something like this, where you're just doing a little square and writing down the color. This makes it really easy to see, because in a minute I'm going to be coloring in this girl. So when you go to pick skin tones, I have all of my markers swatched out here, and I can pick shades. I usually pick 2 or 3 shades, so I know they all go together. If you're looking for a more fun, less boring way to color swatch, I highly recommend my Fun Fab swatch pad, which I made with my Facebook group, which is just sheets and sheets and sheets of really fun little illustrations that you can color, and then you can record the colors that you're swatch. Of course, these will bleed, so if you do want to use this, you can just put a piece of paper under each page so you can get the colors swatched in without ruining the page behind it. So let's get to coloring. So you've done your color swatch. One thing I have to say is that Copics really, I'm just going to use Copics because they are my favorite. I really consider them an investment, but I am also a full-time artist and I make my living off of my drawings and my books. in my classes, so I am going to be using the, a quality premium product. It does not mean, however, that you have to do that. I'm just demoing them with them because I have the most colors. So this is a project from my new book that I'm working on, which is Learn to Draw Art Deco Style. And I want to show you how I'm going to draw in this book. Now, first thing I do is I'm going to shade in, I'm going to pick 3 shades of the same color. So you can do 3 pinks, you can do 3 greens. This one I happen to be using these 3 blues, and they're not even in the same series, but again, I've kind of swatched them out, so these are the ones I'm going to be working with. Now, Copic markers can be very streaky when you're coloring. Okay, so this is what I want to talk about, because sometimes this can be very undesirable for some. So if I'm coloring like this, it will leave brush marks behind. So there's a few ways that you can work with it. What I like to do is, if I'm working in something that has a vertical orientation, say like her skirt here, I welcome that look because it goes in line with the style. So I will, can go ahead. You have to be very intentional with your brush strokes because, again, you will be seeing them. So you have to learn how to work with them and just know that's kind of how they operate. And then I'll show you another way a few ways that you can eliminate them. So first thing I'm going to do is color this whole skirt with just the lightest base color. And then when we get to this part, I'm going to switch direction because I know that my brush strokes are going to show, so I want to make them in the same direction that the fabric is going. So it makes sense. It's like petting a dog. You don't pet the dog's fur in the opposite of the growing direction or sideways, right? You usually you pet the dog or the cat in the same direction as the hair grows. It's the same thing with markers. Weird analogy, but I know you know what I'm talking about. Okay? Because that way, if your brush strokes show, it makes sense to whatever it is that you are coloring. And now I'm going to pick the same skin tone colors, the same thing where I pick 3 tones for the skin tone colors. So if I'm not sure, rather than random testing, which is what I normally do, I finally broke down and color swatched these out. So I want to pick 3 shades or 2 shades that are going to marry well. So maybe my where's my EOO? Oh, there it is. Okay. So maybe I do that one. Then I can look and be like, okay, what goes well with that? That's very pink. I can maybe do that barley beige goes well. Barley beige, there it is. So it saves you a lot of time if you just grab them from your color sheet. I'm gonna do the first coat first. Now, you can see how well loved this color is. Now on her arm, again, this is a very long strip of space. So doing the long strokes makes sense because it mirroring, it kind of matches the subject that I'm coloring. But seeing her neck is more of a wide open space, and so is her face. So if I don't want to see the brush strokes, a workaround is to just do little circles of a color and move quickly. And in both directions you want to move quickly because the alcohol dissolves very quickly. And so you only have a minute to work. So you're going to move no matter if you're working with lines or this little tiny circles. If you do this little tiny circles, you're going to eliminate that streaking effect. Just move quickly, little baby circles all around. And you won't see any brush strokes. So again, the alcohol markers layer very well. So you can even get a little bit of darker shade just by using the same color twice. You see how that works? So even though I'm just using the same color just doing a second coat gives you a little tiny bit of a darker color. So if you're nervous about shading, then doing 2 coats of the same color is the way to go. Again, her legs are long and lean, so my brush strokes, it's okay if those are long and lean as well. So it just depends on the area that you're coloring. And I'll do a solid color for her hair. I'm gonna pick a random brown. And again, I can do little circles if I don't want to see those brush strokes. Oops. All right, and there is coat 1 done. So for the second coat, so we do our coloring in layers because Copics are super blendy and they layer really well. All right, so what we're gonna do now is go in with the second. So first we did the first layer with this light. This is the second one right here. So we're going a little bit darker here. And then again, we're gonna use very intentional strokes to color in the areas that are a little bit darker. So this has like gathers and folds. So we are going to, my lights on here. We're putting the darker areas this way, okay? Because I'm kind of like, my brush is like the fabric. Oh, and I don't mean to be doing that so much. So I'm gonna pretend the light source is coming like straight at her. So I'm gonna leave this area light. So it's gonna go dark on either side. So we have, and don't panic, because if you ever like do too much dark and you cover up your highlight, you can just sneak it back in with some colored pencil. But see how you can see my brush strokes? So I'm just being intentional about what they're doing. And also like, these are very much like paint brushes almost. So you can use that to your advantage. If you notice, I'm pretty much almost covering over everything, but the layer effect is what it makes it end up being like dimensional and looking a little bit more realistic. So again, on the far side of her is going to be shaded because the light is coming again here and like hitting a strip down the side. So this will be going down here. And I tend to color so fast that I can't even stay in the lines, which I'm not gonna lie, it's a little embarrassing. Oh, especially when I'm on video. So again, I'm doing very vertical strokes, and any folds here that are in the back are gonna definitely be darker. See all these folds, folds, folds. So this little fold casts a shadow here, but this is also like behind her leg. So that will be darker. Let's see, I'm gonna zoom out a little bit so you can see no matter where I'm working. Back up to here. So we have, again, this very intentional, leaving the brush strokes intentionally there. And then the shading. Going to be around, again, we're going to have it end up being all the way down here. And so again, this is a long shape, so I'm going to have long brush strokes. And any areas in the back of folds are going to be darker, and then we can always pop back in any highlights. So don't worry about like doing it in the wrong places, because you can always just pop them back in super simply with a white colored pencil at the end. Sometimes it's easier just to just color in the whole thing and then go back in with the highlights rather than trying to preserve the highlights. Just pop them back in. I'm all about whatever is easiest. I do like how it's like gradating. Gradating, is that a word? And again, very intentional with my brush strokes because I know that they're gonna show. Itchy eye. Okay. All the way down here. I'm not even coloring in the lines. This back there is definitely shaded. And then we take the darker color of her skin tone and we're gonna do that as well. And that always goes on the face, goes around the hairline. Okay. And then if it's coming this way, usually pick one or the other side of the nose to put the nose bridge, because the nose is actually made up of the shadows on either side of it. So that's a very quick and simple way to do that. And there's always a shadow on the neck because the big face is jutting forward towards you. And then this would be in shadow because the dress is casting a shadow there, as well as here. And then typically it's the areas of the arm or the limbs that are closest to the body that get shaded. So we do this one. And if you want to make it look really rounded, you can actually do, you can do on either side, and then the middle portion is highlighted because that's right where the light is shining. There's a shadow there for where the bracelet is, and then going down to her legs, it's the same thing. You have kind of shadow on one side, shadow on the other, and then you leave the middle unshadowed. And this one's behind, so I'm actually going to shade the whole thing. Okay, so now we have that shading done, and then the second coat. You can see the highlighted parts are coming towards you. All right, now we get to do the third layer. So we just keep layering up and layering up. That's why it's just nice to have the 3 shades in a row pre-selected so you're ready to go. And once again, now this darkest one is just gonna go in the very darkest regions only. So kind of these areas, again, it's kind of like your shadow area shrinks as you go up the shading scale, if you will. So like this under her arm is going to be dark because it's under her arm. Again, kind of keeping my brush strokes intentional. These are farthest away from the light, so this side's going darker. And then these are like folds in here. That's why there's some dark there. And then this goes kind of around the corner, so that's darkest. Now we have all these folds in here. So now we need to be much more intentional about where the dark spots are. So we'll do this one. And by the way, if you want to learn how to draw her, it's in the book, and I also have videos to my quadrant method as well for drawing. The reference is in the book. Okay, so now these little areas that are like behind all get shaded. So this one is definitely all shaded. You can have a shadow under there. This guy's gonna be dark because he's like hiding back there. Let's see, this one is gonna be dark because again of where the light source is coming. So you can make these all shaded or you can have them taper out. It really doesn't matter. As long as you have, it's weirdly forgiving shadows. As long as you have like a variation of the types, you can kind of get away with a lot of different things. It doesn't have to be like super duper accurate because people will understand like, ooh, So much going on with that. It looks impressive just to have different shades in the same drawing even. So like this one is a fold, so the things behind it will get shaded. Just making sure I have all the things. So this little ruffle gets shaded. And then yes, right here, so I'm kind of reviewing all the little nooks and crannies. This one, and then these are dark, because this one, yeah, this one is like behind all of these other ones. And this one, this dark, and this one is dark. And let's see, okay, this one in here is a little messed up. So when I want to go blend, what I do is I go back to my very lightest color. Okay, so if there's any like awkward transitions or places that are looking kind of not well blended, go to your lightest of the three colors, and you can actually color over everything, and that will much more smoothly join your colors all together. Little alcohol marker hack. You just can do a nice big swaths, because it only makes the color we put down first a little bit darker, so you don't run the risk of doing too much. Now I kind of lost a lot of my highlights, so I'm gonna go back and put them in. And I'm also thinking that I can go one more darker in her skin, because I can barely see that shading. So I was just gonna go back here, and it looks like this light suntan would be a good third color. So I'm gonna grab that. I always do try to do 3 shades for every whatever it is that I'm drawing. Just a little bit darker, and that's where all the dimension comes from. Is just having a layers and layers of more shadows. And the area is always like smaller and smaller of the darkest color. And let me show you let me explain better what that means as well. Okay, so basically your first layer is this big. Your second layer is going to always be smaller than that layer, right? Because if it was the same size, it would just take over the whole circle. And then the third layer is even less. So the area decreases as your shade goes up. I really can't actually color in the lines today. And then when you want to blend it, you go back to the first color. And you can blend them together that way. Better, okay? And you can also, because you can layer these, you can go back to the different colors and keep. So again, you can keep layering them as you go. And then there's the streaks I was talking about earlier. And now look what happens if I do the small circles like I was mentioning. You see, once I'm done, how that eliminates the look of the brush strokes. Okay, so if you don't want to see these lines, you want to do the full circle. Another tip about these also, if you have already started with that, look, you can cross color this way. It's kind of common sense. You have vertical lines, it's like mowing your lawn, and then the next week you switch directions to kind of erase the lines that you did last week with your lawnmower, right? Or your marker. So that's another tip on how to get rid of the streak effects. Yeah, that's solid and that's solid. So that works too. All right, so now we need to go back and have the highlights because they got drowned out by everything else. So I'm gonna start with a white colored pencil and work some of these highlights back in. But what I always end up doing is just using a gel pen because then I'm like, oh, we could just have punchier highlights because that's super fun. So the white pencil will get us started, and then if we're not satisfied or you want to pack more of a highlighting punch, you can use paint pen instead. Oh, I'm already getting the urge to get it out because this is just not very satisfying. All right, so I'm gonna get a white paint pen. There's lots of options when it comes to white. I like a big old bold paint pen. Okay, so this is gonna be highlighted more. This is also why I don't worry if I lose some of the highlights with the drawing, because you can always just very quickly pop them back in. You can use a white gel pen if you're not as bold as I am about this big old highlighted regions. I just like things to pop. You can even put a little doop on your nose. It's a very big paint pen for a very little girl. And you can even, any part that you think that you can envision the sun catching, you can pop a highlight in for. Maybe this here. So fun. Yeah, so you have all the different variations and then it looks like this ruffle. And then just to finish this up, let's see, probably want to do black shoes. Do that. And I always might like to make it look like they're standing on something, so I'll usually give them a floor. Floor is always nice. Let's see. Oh, she still only has one shade of her hair. So maybe add a little shading to her hair. Again, just anytime you add more than one shade, it makes it just look a little bit more realistic. Not that we're going for like full realism or anything, but give her some red lipstick. Oh, yes. Ooh, maybe her bracelet is like gold, which we don't really have, so maybe that. It's a little browner than I was looking for, but oh well. And then let's see, we'll get some gray. And give her a ground to stand on. And we can give her a ground. It's just, I feel better when they're grounded on something, One more thing that I forgot to mention that's super important and really interesting and that will help you a ton is when it comes to working with fine liners, please be aware that it is actually super smart and cool to use fine liners that are either specifically designed to work with, say, like your Copic, but if you use water soluble or water-based multi-liners, the water does not interact with the alcohol markers, so you'll never get any streaking. So if you can get a hold on, this is a fine liner from Arteza, it's an Inkonic fine liner. Staedtler makes them, Stabilo makes them. You can really get them on lots of different brands, but if you look for water-soluble fine liners, you won't get any smearing. You see that? You see how it stays completely independent of each other? That is because that is a water-based product under the alcohol-based marker. So they make a great pairing because they work so independently one another. So I know a lot of times people, there's a lot of streaking. I don't know if this one will do it or not. Yes, it does. Okay, so you see immediately there's some bleeding or some streaking. And if that is a fear for you, then just know that using a water-soluble, water-based fine liner will get you out of that mess or prevent that mess from happening each and every time. So I hope those were some helpful hints. On the end screen here, I will link to some of the other projects in the Art Deco book, and I hope you enjoyed today's very thorough lesson on alcohol markers. See you in the next vid.